To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. To everything turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time for every purpose under heaven. A time to create a congregation in Evergreen, a Jewish community in Evergreen, and a time to keep it going. Welcome, everyone. So glad you're here. Just want to make sure, for those on Zoom, make sure you can hear me okay. Wave if you can hear me. Awesome. All right, terrific. So we have here two special guests and others that have joined us, founding members of Congregation Beth Evergreen, and of course Joanne Greenberg up there at the very first minion, and our beloved storyteller, matriarch, and wise woman of the wood.
Hoo-ha!
and Richard here, invited by Joanne. The one who light. And there was light.
And there was light.
He was the designer and maker of the lights in this congregation. So part of and a founding member. We have other esteemed guests here that I hope will be Meryl and we have Steve and Renee and of course Richard and Lois, and so hopefully we'll get to hear from some. But this is part of our ongoing series called Taboo Topics, which started, with really controversial stuff like death and abortion and things like that. But I thought, Joanne can tell a story
Maybe.
that
Like
wouldn't
death.
necessarily label PG. And she said to me last week, "Warts and all?" I said, "Warts and all."
Okay.
So we're in for a treat.
Okay.
The two of them will offer their memories and recollections, and then of course I trust
what's left of our memories and recollections.
invite questions as well.
Yes.
All right. About audio? Yeah, okay.
Do we have?
It's quite loud in the room. Yeah, okay. I will, let's use my computer, Sarah, and if you could turn up the volume of the microphones that are being used here. So Joanne, introduce yourself and say hello.
Hi. Amazed to be here. Absolutely gobsmacked. Because I remember, oh, by the way, I was not an original flounder. I was not. I got lost, hopelessly lost, on the first meeting of the group of 8. So there were 7, and I was trying desperately to get there. And I ended up in a construction site in the mud, and I decided to go home. I had been sitting quietly, thinking of nothing in particular when I got a phone call. Hello, hi. You're Greenberg? Yeah. Jewish? Yeah. Thank God. Amen. Now, I was used to this because we were the Jews. I didn't know there was anybody else here in not Evergreen, but on Lookout or Evergreen or anywhere else that was around us. Our phone number was 175. And there were 175 phone owners on Lookout Mountain. Evergreen was a wet spot in the road. Bergen Park was non-existent. There was a gas station and a lady made hot dogs. If you got gas, you could get a hot dog. There was a doctor who was also the vet and the coroner, Doc Hunt. And you hope he didn't get confused. The drugstore stayed open as a courtesy. And most of the people were summer people. And I was used to being the Jew. It was faintly, but faintly nice. We had been invited for breakfast, for lunch one time, and lady called up in a snit, Mrs. Cheek. And she said, I just found out, and it's about the Jews and it's about food. Let me know quick what it is, because we're planning something, and when we know that you're gonna choke it down, whatever it is, but it's this food thing. I said, well, all right, what are you gonna have? Turned out to be fine. So, no better, is it?
You're gonna have to repeat all these stories, you know.
I have to go back again. No, are people having trouble hearing?
You're in the room, don't have the mic.
Okay.
It works.
Anyway, that was what Evergreen was, and why I was the Jew. People wanted to find out what Jews thought about stuff, and I'd have to tell them about what this Jew thinks, which wasn't always harmonious. So I wasn't all that put out. And he said, I'm looking for Jews. And I said, well, you found 1.5 here. And so he said, well, we're planning to get together. Great. And because I wasn't able to come to the first meeting, Senor, hit it.
Okay. Well, I'm what's left of Richard Walton. And I was here from day one. Some of the remarks that I have here that I'm going to go over with you guys were first said back on January 6th of 2006, when we had a installation dinner at the Highwan Country Club for this guy. But when I talked to Joanne last week and she wanted my input, so I dug out the old notes and I have revised them for this occasion. So when Sally Korth called me in December of 2005 and told me she and some other members of the congregation were planning an installation affair, she asked me to make a few remarks about CBE, our roots from where we came. About a month before the high holidays in 1974, Bernie Golden put a small ad in the Canyon Courier seeking other Jewish folks in the Evergreen area that might be interested in gathering together for the high holidays. The Courier published the wrong phone number. They corrected it the next week. But to hear Bernie tell it, and he did tell it, he was starting to wonder if there was enough time to put something together. So he got out the Evergreen telephone directory, all 20 or so pages of it, and started calling every name that looked or sounded Jewish to him. At that time, the Evergreen area population, from Bergen Park to Conifer and Morrison to Upper Bear, was about 14,000 people. He was off to a great start, but Bernie was a man of the mission. Bernie was an insurance executive from Oyster Bay, Long Island, New York, that had migrated to Colorado with his 3 children, Jan, Lori, Michael, and David. As I recall his story, he had been a naval officer in World War II and had been one of the co-founders, a plank holder, Navy jargon, of a congregation in Oyster Bay in the late 1950s or early 1960s. His thinking was, been there, done that, that was fun, let's do it again. Attending that very first gathering.
Richard, can I jump in?
Yeah.
With the story that Bernie told me? The misprinted phone number in the Canyon Curry article went to a woman who was a virulent anti-Semite. She was getting all of these calls saying, "You want to start a Jewish congregation?"
Don't tell me that.
I will add that. So attending that first gathering were Rebecca and Stephen Bloom, Bernie Goldman and his kids, Judy and David Goodman.
Yeah.
Joanne Greenberg
No.
was with us in spirit. She was sort of there. She got lost trying to find Bernie's house.
Yeah.
Bernie at the time had the house on the highest peak in Highwan Hills, 360-degree view. So she got lost trying to find his house. Pearl and Herb Harris, Sally Korf, Janie Pogach, Petra and Steve Pollock, Gary Stearns, and myself. What a group we were. We were East Coast establishment escapees, West Coast beatnik seeker of enlightenment, and Midwestern retirees. We were wealthy, middle and working class, and poor. We were authors, PhDs, attorneys, business executives, college grads, college dropouts, ex-military, and teachers. We were conservative, reformed, and secular. What could we possibly have in common that would unite us and keep us together? The commonality was our Jewish roots, our history, our culture, and of course, our food. But not necessarily the Jewish religion. In Evergreen, we were all alone, all migrants looking for a safe harbor, and we were very surprised to find others just like us. Our roots, history, culture, and food were the main ingredients. Judaism was the matzah meal that held it all together. Now we are Reconstructionists. Back then, we were under constructionists. I thought about recounting some of the CBE firsts, such as the very first time we got together at Bernie's house to meet each other, plan a service, and a potluck meal to break the fast. We only had 7 men. We joked that if we really needed a minion and can find another man, could we then count Bernie's 2 preteen sons? I remember an attractive young woman on some kind of diet that always showed up with a jug of watermelon juice. And I hope she is here tonight. I haven't seen her. So Sally Corf, are you here?
No.
No,
No, she's not.
She's happy.
Good for her. I remember Frederick Bloom, the firstborn son of Rebecca and Steve, being the firstborn child in CBE. And shortly thereafter, Jeffrey Pollock, the firstborn son of Petra and Steve, having the first bris in CBE. I remember the wife of attorney David Goodman, Judy. She and Janie Pogach, both Evergreen school teachers, were denied time off without penalty for the high holidays because Jefferson County School District had no policy for Jewish personnel. That changed real fast when David wrote them a letter threatening them with a religious discrimination lawsuit. Now, one of the first CBE Passovers in 1975 or 1976 at the home of Rebecca and Steve Bloom. It was bitterly cold and snowy out that night. Too cold to leave the door open for Elijah. We opened it a crack for about 10 seconds. But inside was a warm and caring family, just not all of whom were related to each other. Steve played guitar and led us in Turn, Turn, Turn.
which he did every year, which we.
Oh, more than every year. And that may have been the only song he knew because over the years, he led us in it many times. Although I hid the afikoman in plain sight, no one could find it. It was under a clear glass water bowl on the kitchen floor for the dogs. It was in plain sight. No one in their search thought to look down. It didn't take very long for CBE to outgrow meetings in members' homes. And we rented space at the Greystone Castle for several years. Then the Methodist Church graciously and generously took us in until we built our own space. I remember when CBE got its first Torah and the late Albert Greenberg
I'm gonna talk about that later. I wanna go back a little bit.
made a beautiful portable ark for it. Right there. I remember the cool and rainy Sabbath day that we opened the synagogue to everyone for the first time. The entire congregation gathered at the Methodist Church, and we joyfully and proudly walked, carrying our Torah to its new home. And I better not ever forget the first CBE wedding on July 8th, 1979. It was to my wife, Jill Stoll. And there is a photo on the CBE website in the About Us tab that shows a picture of us with Steve Bloom, who was acting as the MC for the wedding. But I think the most significant of all the firsts was that our little ragtag group was the first to introduce Judaism in the foothills. And in 1975, when CBE registered with the Colorado Secretary of State as a nonprofit religious organization, CBE became the first official Jewish congregation in Jefferson County. We are now the oldest.
Yes, well,
Joanne?
go back a little.
Okay,
Go back a little. at that second meeting, the one I showed up at, somebody said, let's have a Yom Kippur blast party. That was the first of what I think were three major challenges. I looked across the room at Steve Bloom, who looked at me, and the first time, I've had maybe the 3 times in my life when I've had a conversation with a stranger without speech. He looked at me and he said, that's not what I want. And I said, no, that's not what I want either. Do you want to do this or should I? I said, you do it. And he said, that's not what we're interested in. We want high holy days. Bernie had said, I've got 2 kids who need to be bar mitzvah. And I had learned enough Hebrew and enough chants and tropes so that I did that for them. Why not do it for Bernie's kids? And so I was, at that time, quit laughing.
I'm laughing because you left out an important detail. The proposal was to do a pizza party on Yom Kippur.
Yeah,
Like, not after Yom Kippur or before Yom Kippur, but to do
to do it.
a party with eating and drinking and merriment on Yom Kippur. That's what Joanne and Steve were not
That's
interested
not
in.
what we wanted to do. And so that led us there. And somebody said, we need to call ourselves something. Well, there's, Beth Shalom, there's Beth Joseph. Why not Beth Evergreen? And somebody said, why the hell not? It was a joke. But it made me know that this was not going to be the congregation from which I had run all those years ago. So that was the direction that we started to go in. Bernie was divorced. You said warts and all. Bernie was divorced and he had a dog who unfortunately had saved his life. Bernie was a wonderful man, but the dog was not. The dog shed, and he said, where I go, the dog goes. So every time that we celebrated anything, the dog would be walking up and down where we were singing. Remember, we didn't have any books. I said, well, I have a book. It was a conservative book, and I liked it because it had a piece of mine in it. And I thought, oh, okay, it's fun. Everybody had some old book, but of course the pages and the prayers weren't consistent. So somebody had to say, well, try and find this, try and find that. And when we did, we would recite the prayer. This is still in Bernie's house. For a couple or 3 years, we were in Bernie's house until somebody mentioned that all the asthmatics were going nuts because of Bernie's dog. Bernie said, in case of you and I win, you lose, not my house anymore. So we moved, and we moved also to Petra and Steve's house for a while. And then we moved to this, the Greystone. And the Greystone was a big area, and all the walls were elk heads and moose and all of that. So you remember that? So we were saying prayers with all these mooses and stuff like that.
By that time, we were being led in our services by Max Frankel.
Oh, no. No. We had nobody. And then we had Jonas Kickin. You don't remember Jonas Kickin, do you?
No.
I'll tell you why we don't remember Jonas Kickin. Jonas Kickin thought we were a bunch of twits. He had no love for us whatsoever. He was a very intellectual guy who couldn't stand us. And that's why nobody remembers him. I remember him because his wife was nice.
When did we get Max then?
Oh, that was way after. Remember, we had a couple of student rabbis, we had, Rabbi Goldberger, when he wasn't doing something else. And so that's what we
And we
had.
had, who was that cantor, the lady?
Yeah,
Sherwin,
Robbie Sherman.
Robbie Sherwin. That was for a while.
so we were looking and so forth. And then Max Franco came. He was a lawyer, but he knew stuff. He really epitomizes my understanding of a phrase, a sentence in the Pirkei Avot. He whose wisdom exceeds his deeds, his wisdom will not endure. He whose deeds exceed his wisdom will endure. He told the worst jokes you ever heard in your life. They were bad theologically, they were bad in every way, shape, and form. He was good, top to bottom, side to side. Uncle Max. Uncle Max and I went to prison for, about 3-4 years. With lunch for the Jewish prisoners. And people said to me, are there Jewish people in prison? How could that be? Oh, yeah?
Bernie Madoff.
Nothing's so high in the Colorado prison system. We run on a lower branch.
We're not exempt.
Not really. And so I would get up every time on the high holy days and say, send money. Quick, give us some money. Everybody's gave their old tally tote. And we got turned down because there has to be a standard for all the prisoners. This is making me irritated now for what happened 20 years ago. Partly, the Wiccans got to light their bale fire and we didn't get our Shabbos candles in the jail. Now, why that was, I'll tell you. Exhaustive blame. Because the Jews for Jesus and the Messianic Jews said they were Jews and we said they weren't. And people say these goddamn Jews don't know who's a Jew and who isn't. So there. Okay. Whatever happened, yes. Bar mitzvahs. I love that. They were at my house. Oh, and I don't want any more people complaining. The dirt road has been replaced by something, but everybody doesn't like coming up and having to back out. I'm just learning how to back in. And I'm hoping that it's going to be a roundabout pretty soon. I taught Torah and how to chant, and I thought it was the chant. Well, it ain't. There are dozens of these. There's a whole trope trainer, and I would go to, the parents would come and we would find out what section it was, and then I would tell them, call this number in Canal Street. The guy on Canal Street loved us. Hello, what do you want? Well, I want to get, at that time it was cassette tapes or records via what's the date on that? Well, it's whatever, quick. tell me when. And he would say, well, that Verizon isn't your, where are you from? Colorado, figures. So they got the tapes, and then I would copy what they had and reduce it all to my tape. And the guy who made the tapes was a guy by the name of Israel Yanai. I am one of Yanai's girls. My trope is like no other trope in the whole history of tropes, before or after. The trope trainer doesn't have it. Tara will prove. She proves about that. Yes.
So there's a whole generation, CVE, B'nai Mitzvah, who are going to services and saying, that's not the real
That's not
trope.
right.
That's not Joanne's trope.
You got it. The bat mitzvahs, bar and bat mitzvahs were in the backyards of people, some of which were fine, some of which were not. I'm thinking of a couple of events, one of which was it was a bar mitzvah, a lovely little boy. There was an emergency next door. So we had a ding, 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 the police, from they landed the chopper. There was a whole catastrophe. The kid decided, I don't care. This is my bar mitzvah. I am gonna do and he's singing away like anything. I was so proud I could have busted. It was a beautiful thing. Then there was another one whose name I will not mention because somebody's here who knows him. Who in the middle of it, where, you know. Oh, they know, see?
And Harvey Kugler was leading the.
In the middle of it said,
That's it.
that's all, folks.
That's all I memorized.
That's all I remember, that's it. Oh, gosh. I liked it. I liked it. There still aren't, by the way, huge blowouts that have the bar, the bat mitzvah doing the 6-day war in chicken liver. We don't do that at Beth Evergreen, and I'm so proud of us for that. I think it's wonderful. There was one that I remember very definitely. She was in my little class, and somebody always breaks the code because the bar and bat mitzvah is impossible. You all know it. It can't be done, but it is all the time. Absolutely. Kids memorize, kids read, and somebody breaks the code and then everybody learns the trope and it's okay. There was one little girl, sweet little soul. And I thought, I called her up and I said, you know, is it me? Not everybody thinks I'm so great, you know, it's like, you're okay. Is it a bar mitzvah? You may not really want to do this, because I always ask people, and very often it's at gunpoint. And no, it's not that. Well, what is it? Well, I don't like to sing in public. I don't want people watching you sing. I said, I don't care. We'll put a bag over your head. I'm not interested in that. And she said, well, and they had her bat mitzvah at the country club, the one halfway down the hill. And then I knew why. If you had bombed St. Louis, there wouldn't be a Jew left in St. Louis who was not Orthodox, who was Orthodox. There was a phalanx of rabbis, maybe 10 of them, who were all all related to her. And I thought, why didn't they tell me? This poor soul was looking, singing for all these rabbis. That the secret in the sauce was that they all thought that we were probably Indians. And buffalo and hunting people who would not know how to, they wouldn't know how to go from a load of coal. And so they, oh my God, these people really sing. They know the trope, they know all that stuff. Wow. They were wowed by her. So hot, sometimes it works.
Want to give Richard a chance to do the.
I do.
Okay.
Hit it,
You want to close with that last paragraph?
huh?
You want to close with that last paragraph and then we can talk with.
Well, I have,
everybody?
I
Or
have
do you
a
have
lot
something
more
else?
to go. I want to talk about, yeah, we did this and we did that.
Do we cover all your notes on the other page?
Let me look at the page.
This is a good example of what our holiday services used to be like.
No, here's the page with your notes.
Here's this page.
That's the page with your notes in the margins.
No. That's fine.
We're real organized.
We talk about her and Pearl. I want you to talk about that. I also want to talk about a couple of challenges that we have. This is the warts and all piece. But go
Well,
ahead.
why don't you do that
I
first?
will do that. And I will do it. The first challenge, of course, was not pizza on Yom Kippur. We had a woman who was president of our congregation who raised a lot of money for a project and then left.
With the money?
Certainly with the money. With the money. Huh? Yeah. And people felt that something should have been done or should have happened. Why not? Why? How? And we all got together and talked about it, talked it out, and decided we wanted to do it and be here anyway. And the third, of course, was building this building, which nearly broke us up. Remember what Rich said in the beginning, who we were. And a lot of us, remember, none of the early part had dues in it. And we didn't think about money because we didn't need any.
No, we just made contributions as we needed
Yeah.
for postage or mailing something or,
What is it, 20 bucks every little once in a while?
yeah. It was, whatever you can throw in the pot.
Yeah. We were at the Methodist church. A lot of us were happy, a lot of us weren't. They took down the cross, but you're not gonna take down the stained glass windows, which show Jesus with the little children and all of that good stuff. And certain people felt uncomfortable with it. I never did. But then we decided that we needed a rabbi. And after a lot of search and a lot of pain, because to be brutally honest, we were a tiny congregation and they were not going to give us from the top of the
We were a tiny congregation. We wound up with a tiny rabbi. He was the star.
That was after
Elliot Baskin.
that was after a lot of smoke and flame and other people that we realized we didn't want. And we got Rabbi Baskin, and we were at the Methodist Church. And one service time, Rabbi Baskin said, there is a woman who is a Holocaust survivor who is coming to this congregation, and we want you to honor her in her age and in her experience, and to be gracious to her. And then they came with the Torah. And then we had a Torah, and that was donated by
Steve Feldman.
Steve Feldman. And so it needed an ark. And Albert, I said to Albert, I wish we had an ark. And Albert said, well, I'll build the ark. Well, he looked at ark plans and they were all immense and huge and, you know, for 3 or 4 Torahs and elaborate angels, I don't know, hot and cold something. And so Albert said, is this what you want? And I said, no. And he said, well, I found a plan, but I don't know if it's acceptable. What's it for? It's a gun cabinet. There was a place for 2 guns. And I said, swords into plowshares. Well, what do you want? So he made this ark. It has no nails in it. But we didn't know how to open and close it. We were thinking of wood brackets or I don't know what, wood handles. I still have a model of the handles. And who was there but Merrill? And Merrill said, I will do the handles on the ark, which she has done. One other thing, we wanted a cloth for the bima. And I had a lovely piece of what is the royal color? Beautiful purple.
Techelet.
Hmm?
Techelet.
I wish. Velvet. And I said, oh, let's get all the ladies in the congregation have little wonderful things that they have cherished, little bits of lace and pieces of things that they cherish. And we'll make a rim around the velvet and I'll write something on it, which was the first thing that I read that I could read myself, which was Dalifne Ata Omed, know before whom you stand. Dalifne me, before whom Ata Omed. Okay, so I called for everybody in the congregation to submit the wonderful pieces. I had the lace handkerchief that was at my wedding, and I used that. When we saw what they thought was meaningful to them, it was a blow. Old corduroy, chenille bedspread, I don't know what. We were amazed, shocked. The sewing group said, we're throwing out. Somebody said, no, if you cut it really small, they won't know the difference. We cut it really small and we made a rim around it. And for a long time it was used until it got lost. So I don't know where it is. What other? We're fine. And then we got this understanding that we had to have a full-time rabbi. And so we said a not very harmonious goodbye, unfortunately, to Rabbi Baskin. And we started with, should I say it? Oh, what the hell. A wonderful man came to us. That's not you. You're waiting.
I'm waiting. I'm in Buffalo.
And he was from Fort Collins, and he impressed the dickens out of us. We were all ready to go. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, he met with everybody. He was supposed to show up on Friday and he didn't. We called the hospitals, we called the shops, we called the sons and daughters of the mothers and fathers. Gone, not here. So on the next Tuesday, he called from an apartment in Denver and told us that told her that he didn't know whether he wanted to be a pulpit rabbi or not. Seeing what it takes to be a pulpit rabbi, I don't blame him. And then we got Jamie, who turned out to be Beshert in 7 edges, as we say. So that's where it stands now. We got a Rob. And we're here, and it's absolutely amazing. Doesn't it amaze you like it amazes?
Makes me feel like an altar cocker.
That too. And I'm
Yeah,
probably
50
older than you'll ever be.
50 years.
Okay, end up.
All right, well, I wrote this, but she's gonna read it because I can't get through it
No, you can't do
without getting all verklempt. Last paragraph.
it. Yep. And I thought of someone more important for CBE to remember. Many of you have not had the pleasure of really knowing the late Pearl and Herb Harris. Migrants from Des Moines, Iowa. Herb was a retired business owner. From the very first meeting at Bernie's house, I can't remember them not being a CBE, and I certainly second that. Until they became too ill to attend. Even when they could no longer drive, we would make arrangements for someone to pick them up and take them home. They were at every CBE function that I was ever at. If Max Frankel was considered everybody's uncle, Pearl and Herb were CBE's Bubba and Zeta. Over the years, they were major benefactors. I know that without their significant financial help, the land that this synagogue sits on might never have been purchased. Right you are. They were significant contributors to the building fund as well, although they didn't live long enough to see the finished product. Their gentle wisdom and quiet generosity helped create the CBE you know today. It has been said, you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you came from. So that CBE will never forget the moral, ethical, and financial contributions of Pearl and Herb. The founders have gotten together and have donated a yard-side wall plaques in their memory as a reminder of their roots from where we came. Amen. So yes, we remember them. Thank you. And thank you.
Yes, thank you
Thank-
both. That's
Thank you.
Question.
let's open it up and Murray,
I just want to acknowledge,
just so they can hear you on Zoom.
yes, well, that's what I wanted to address is Zoom, because I see Steve and Petropavlov, who were one of the original 7. Correct? Hi.
Hi.
Meryl.
Hi.
Hi.
Who's speaking?
Oh, wow.
Say,
was
say
that?
it again.
Who was that speaking?
That's-
Do they?
Murray.
Merle,
Yes. Hello.
you're not in Hawaii?
No. Not yet.
Wave.
Ernie?
I have a question for Steve and Petra.
Okay,
Are you guys still in Idaho?
we are.
Yes,
You're still in Boise?
We
We're-
are.
just outside of Boise and Meridian, but it's all kind of one city, so. Yeah, we've been here since 1978. We left Evergreen in 76, so we were really only there the first couple years of CBE. Only in,
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi. And our son, who had the Frontier Frontier Briss is now 49 years old.
Oh.
I am off the cocker.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for keeping us on the list. We've rarely even passed through Evergreen in all these years, but we're delighted to join in and 50 years, it's hard to believe.
That's great.
Yeah. And Rebecca Martin is on as well. She's just back from India this week, so
Hi, Rivka.
she's recovering.
Where is she?
Rebecca, she's not a.
Oh, not a picture. Oh. Who else is-
Yeah. Other questions for Richard, Joanne?
Bill Rosen. Was this the whole synagogue? It was this big when you built it?
Excuse me?
Was the
The
synagogue?
question is about the building itself.
Yeah.
So the building as it stands, the layout as we have it was built as stage one. With an intent to, right, because most synagogues don't have the arc on the northern wall. That this was going to be the school for the Hebrew school, and on the other side of the social hall, and where that overflow parking is, was going to be the sanctuary, looking over Denver to the east. Ran out of money to consider that second edition in about 5 years after I got here.
Okay.
We were in overflow. We were over 300 people for high holidays, and we started to talk about phase two. But the demographics leveled out, and we never got to that size crunch. So there is a phase two plan. I think it's in David Froman's basement or something.
This was a big.
This property, when we bought it, was Anderson's veterinary practice,
That's right.
Doc Anderson. And he had all of this land as part of his practice. There were two buildings. There was the house, and then he had an outbuilding for his practice and for large animals. And there's a photo on the website. You can see the house behind us, and we're all standing out there, and that was the groundbreaking for the actual tearing down of the old buildings and starting construction.
Yeah.
When my son was bar mitzvahed in 1988 with you and Sam Klaus, Steve and Renee Bernstein were the lay leaders. We didn't have a rabbi at that time.
That's right.
They're sitting right behind you.
Hello. I just want to say how special they
Are, not were, how special they are.
I said how special they were to do that.
Oh.
Thank you. That was Deb Propick. For those on Zoom who might not be able to hear, just offering a tip to Renee and Steve, who were, Renee ran the Hebrew school, the beginning religious school, and Steve was the president for more terms than he should have been allowed to be.
Yes.
And he was the one that would always take down the cross.
He's the only one tall enough to reach it. And maybe we can have some of the early founding and pioneering members, Renee and Steve, Vic and Lois, stand up for us, and Meryl, and anyone else that I missed in house that we can just. Rebecca and Steve and Petra, and Yeah, I think, Randy Murray's been around. Karen Bennett is
Hi, Karen.
one congregant who was born and raised in Evergreen.
Uh-huh.
Hi,
Hi.
but I'm a newcomer. I didn't show up until 32 years ago.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'm Bill Rosenblum, and my wife Rita and I joined in 1977, so we were newcomers, but we for 25 years Beth Evergreen was our focus, and Joanne taught our daughter bat mitzvah, and I remember Rich and Jill, and of course the Friedlands I saw on the picture, and Steve and Renee, and I just think that you guys are fantastic, and it's a incredible part of my life, and I'll be forever grateful. So thank you all.
Thank you, Bill. Great to have you on.
Jane. Go ahead.
Yeah, here, use the mic, goes.
Okay, on one hand, I wanted to thank Joanne. Our daughter Rachel was the first bat mitzvah here. And our son, of course, also learned from Joanne. But the drawback that the kids always talk about is that you would make them weed your gardens.
We came out here. Doreen Heinbach.
Oh,
She was here for Alice.
Yeah,
Stephen Doreen.
we miss her now.
yes.
Took us under her wing. And Joe, I remember when, let's say, we came out at the end of September. And our first meeting with the group was for the high holidays. And we go into this building and all these heads are covered with sheets.
Greystone.
Greystone.
Yeah.
The stuffed heads of animals.
But I was fortunate to be on the board the year we opened this building. We had 347 people for Rosh Hashanah. One of the most emotional memories all of it happened.
What time, what year did you guys join?
79.
79, so right in the first 5 years.
Joanne mentioned,
Say your name.
oh, I'm Robbie, and Joanne mentioned Max Frankel, and I'm curious as to how many of you had the pleasure of knowing him since you were 13. So my daughter, we call Max Frankel the mitzvah man. And what, Joanne, you said that he would tell the same jokes and they weren't that good. We loved it.
Yeah.
Because there was a traditional, that it was what we expected and what we got. And I remember one of his, jokes was, so I'm at this place and I'm gonna say, present and someone, so I say, where should I start? And somebody yelled out, at the end.
Renee, Epstein.
Okay, then, we're reading. I remember we got high on the services, and she had an apron on with products. You were not supposed to collect dues during this. She'd take the money and spend. By the end of the service, her pockets were. That thing. She was amazing.
I want to share a story from Ellen Diesenhoff of blessed memory.
Yes.
Ellen was, and Marty, he's not, who's still with us, thank God. And it would be a great mitzvah to go visit him. If you remember him or don't, you want to just go and say hello. He's in the facility. Loves black and white cookies. These were, quintessential New York Jews. Well, both went to, Orthodox, yeshiva, and, they were highly knowledgeable. And so when she was telling me she was the head of the education committee, ran the religious school when I interviewed. And when she was telling the story of how she and Marty joined the congregation, they came up and they're meeting in a church and using a loose leaf binder prayer book. And they attended the service, and Marty's looking at thinking, oh boy, she's not gonna like this, because they were hodgepodge, right? And not a whole lot of traditional gestalt. And so they're walking out to the car, and Marty says to Ellen, he says, so what did you think? She says, oh, we'll be back. They need us. Yeah, Neil.
Thanks, Jerry. Neil. We're newcomers. We were living in Atlanta, and we were thinking of coming out west, and we visited Evergreen just by chance. Well, first we were researching different places on the front range, and we hadn't narrowed it down. And so Susie was a real estate agent at the time. She contacted a real estate agent called Anthony Jassy to show us some homes. And then she started researching. We didn't know where we were going to be. And then she said, oh my God, Evergreen, they're consecrating, we had a 3-year-old son, and we wanted to have apartments with them. They're consecrating a new temple there. We didn't know, it didn't meaning of homes since the 70s. And that was it. That was what closed the deal for us. We got to go look at Evergreen. And we came involved right away. Yeah, that's essentially.
So speaking of Ellen Diesenhoff, and Jamie, you probably have a history on this, or Joanne, but can you tell the story about how Alpine Bakery started making challah?
Yes, so the question around Ellen Diesenhoff. So Alpine Pastries is a mom and pop bakery and chocolatier shop right here in downtown Evergreen. And the owner used to be the head chocolate chef at the Brown Palace, and they wanted to just be up in here in Evergreen. And Ellen struck up a friendship with them. And, she of course always complained, there's no good challah in Evergreen, or even in Colorado. You go to King Soopers and you say, do you have any challah? They're like, what is that? So she gave her recipes and taught, now I'm forgetting their names. Robert and Rebecca, yeah, thank you. Taught them how to make challah. They made challah and still make challah every week. They sell it to the restaurants for croutons, right? They cut it up, and so several restaurants in Evergreen, I don't know which ones now, are using challah croutons for their salads and things like that. She taught them how to bake hamantashen. So they used to make hamantashen for Beth Evergreen every year for Purim. And so I was go every week to get our family challah from them. And they closed at 3 o'clock. And so it's usually me racing from the office to try to get there before 3 o'clock. And if, of course, that was 3:15 or 3:30, there'd be a nice note for Rabbi Jamie in the challah hanging on the door. They would just leave it out for me. They're still around. Please do, visit them and support them. And
they still make challah?
And they still will make challah. Yeah. And usually just on Fridays. And speaking of, sorry?
Round challah?
And round challah, they made round challah and raisin challah for Rosh Hashanah, for the high holidays. Yeah, just delightful people. They make that. And so Ellen Diesenhoff, of course, when she passed away, so Marty was generous with the contribution to the endowment. And so we annually have an event in her honor to bring out somebody humorous And she was a teacher of literature and English. And so this year, we're lucky enough to have Roger Cannons will be coming in April 12th, 10th, and 11th to be our annual Ellen Diesenoff Scholar Artist in Residence. He wrote The Jew and the Lotus, which would make Rebecca Martin happy, I think. And about the Jewish delegation that went to meet with the Dalai Lama. And he's a esteemed, acknowledged poet and writer and teacher who happens to be related to Sarah Hess family, Sarah's cousin. That was a nice connection.
I have a question for all of you. How many, just a show of hands, nothing funny here, just my idle curiosity, because I want to go back in my notes and maybe add something about it. How many of you were here for the 25th anniversary dinner that we did at El Rancho?
I think that's.
Yeah.
There's about 5 or 6 of us. Okay.
Any other questions for? We got stuff on the chat. Oh, thank you.
Nancy Friedman said Steve and I were there.
We
I
have,
see.
we have had many people, because we are geographic rather than denominational. We've had many Orthodox people come out here and look at us and say, "Oh my God," but we break them.
But so the first rabbi that you mentioned that came up and did services on kind of Red Goldberger was an
Yeah.
Orthodox rabbi.
Yeah,
And so you have did a lot of great work in Denver in terms of creating like the conversion program that some of you may be familiar with, where it's multi-denomination, and used to include Orthodox when he was still living. Was created by Rabbi Goldberg. Some great work that he did, and then of course Uncle Max. So you had the whole range of Jewish leadership that came here, including one of the rabbinical students became the first African American female rabbi.
I was just going to mention her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who is the sister of Val Robinson, who conducts our gospel choir.
I remember her doing
This is a stand, yes.
I remember her doing a service for us, and when she came in,
absolutely.
she was all dressed in white,
Yeah.
and she had her 2 little daughters with her, also all dressed in white.
Yeah.
And she had a beautiful voice.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last I heard of anything about her is that she wound up with her own congregation, and I think it was in someplace like Tennessee.
She's now back in Denver, and I see her once a month at the rabbinical.
Would you say
council.
hello for us, please?
Of course, I do. And she's had some medical issues, so she's not working rabbinically, but still engaged. Yeah. Other questions or stories to share? Yes, Robbie.
I hope this does not mess with your kingdom. I'm currently taping a webinar on mental health at work for the non-therapist. And so we talk a lot about resources and other matters related to that. And I have a slide that says, if you are struggling, these are possibilities for you to reach out to. And one of them is, I listed wise clergy. And I say, the reason I say wise is because I know of a young woman who spoke with her clergy clergy member, and he shamed her, and she later committed suicide. I don't know this person personally. So we are so lucky to have Jamie as our rabbi. He's tender to the bone and so many other things. I wouldn't hesitate to tell him my darkest secret. You want to talk with him?
I think I already love Iris.
I'm Iris Solomon, and here with Don. But, he doesn't want to tell the story, so I will. So similar. I'm just telling him where she's from. Yeah. So, we were from New York, we lived in LA for 15 years, couldn't wait to get out, and, found Evergreen. And we never belonged to temples there. Every temple that we joined up or tried to find, it was a let's keep up with the Jonesowitzes, we called them. So we never had the right jewelry or the right clothing. So it was very uncomfortable. When we came here, met Neshama, found the temple. Debbie Protek was our real estate agent who we suffered through us in 40 homes. And when we got here and realized this community was here and met Jamie and everybody else, we found our closest friends. And walking into the temple, seeing people in jeans and plaid shirts and, you know, boots and dogs, and it was just unbelievable that we found this community up here. And one of the things that we did was we wanted our son Ethan bar mitzvah, and we chose Red Rocks to have the bar mitzvah done at. And it was, I think it was one of the first times they ever allowed a bar mitzvah after we had the synagogue and the building to be brought out of, to have the Torah brought out of the temple. And they agreed to let us bring the Torah up to Red Rocks. And if it wasn't for widespread panic being set up on the stage, I would have been on the stage doing his bar mitzvah, but we had it in the rock room behind, next to the mountains, with the Torah in Albert's gorgeous box with us. It was just an unbelievable, unforgettable moment that the temple allowed us to do that and trusted us as new congregants to have this happen for us. Ethan was taught by Dina, who is now in Israel, and with her family, and we still keep in touch. And the only thing Ethan said after the bar mitzvah, he finished his Torah portion, and he looked at Ron and he said, "Does this mean I have to be Jewish still? Am I done now?" No, that is still true. But it's just an unbelievable.
Earlier this week, we had a ski day, and I was telling the story to Mike and Sandy. I think Sandy was with us. Maybe you were on a different chair. But one of the things that sold, two things that sold me on this congregation. One was after I'd gotten here, so it came in July. December rolled around, and I get a call from David Froman. He says, "We have an emergency meeting. And you have to be there. I know it's your day off on Monday, but you have to show up, and it's up on the chairlift at Loveland with me." So I spent the day skiing with David Froman, you know, trying to keep up with him going down and going up, learning every detail about the congregation that he could share. And what a better way to learn some of the history, and well, maybe the only other better ways to sit in Joanne's house, looking out at the Continental Divide and hearing Joanne tell stories, which I'm glad we got to do. The other is when I met with Bernie Goldman. I'm so glad I got many opportunities to have him take me out to dinner or lunch at his favorite union. What's the something union numbers? 240 Union, his favorite restaurant. And he would correct you. He would say, "Beth Evergreen is not the oldest synagogue in Jefferson County." He and his partner Susan found a congregation that was defunct before for 70 years. but was established in the 19th century, in the 1800s. And it happened to be in Jefferson County. And he raised the money and created a foundation to make it into a museum. He found it, recovered it, restored it. So has his name on 2 congregations. It's a museum at a small house. No, it's in Jefferson County. It's down in Lakewood. Anyway, so I met with him and he told me the story. You know, first thing he said was, "You probably heard a story from Joanne, but you know she's a novelist, right?" I'll tell you the true story, he says. So he told me this. So he shares the story about you know, reading the Canyon Courier, and you know, his friend was one of the editors of the Canyon Courier, and every week seeing there's 19 congregations in the Evergreen. So he said, you know what, I had this idea. We need to put an article saying there's 19 congregations. Let's make it an even 20 and start a Jewish congregation. If you're interested, call the number of the anti-Semite who lives in So by putting an ad in the local newspaper and bringing a bunch of Jews out of the woodwork, literally out of the Ponderosa pine woodwork, to create a congregation, was also how my parents started a Chabad in Rochester. She put an ad in the local paper saying, "I'm looking at it, you know, creating what's called a Chabad, a small fellowship. If there are any other Jews that are interested." And this was a town that had lots of synagogues, but she didn't want to send her kids to one. So it had that same sort of context and history. So having that personal story overlap with Beth Evergreen's story in about the same time period. So I'm a little bit older than Beth Evergreen. So maybe any other questions or comments? So this is really suitable and what a gem of an opportunity. Do you want to say a few words before we close?
No, I was gonna ask that other congregation, the one Bernie told you about. What years was it in approximately?
My memory, which is
1800s?
Yeah, late 1800s to the early 1920s, 1930s, something like that.
Okay.
It was created, but that was, so there was a.
But that would account for the Secretary of State's office telling us that we were the first in Jefferson County, because they probably didn't have to register for tax exempt nonprofit status at that time, and they wouldn't have been on the records.
I'm sure that's the case, yeah.
But remember, there has been a Jewish presence ever since the 1840s. And the oldest religious structure, which still stands in Colorado, is a synagogue. I hope everybody knows that.
One in Trinidad? One in Trinidad?
Trinidad or Leadville?
Here, Auraria, it's now an art museum, part of the.
Part of the Auraria campus.
The area thing, yeah.
Yeah, across from the Golden Mayor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the oldest, and you can, if you can read the Hebrew, there's a whole little lunette over the door in Hebrew. Yeah.
Well, very nice. We're so the intent, Susie is helping to put together the program for the Jubilee celebration, which is marking really the anniversary of the first meetings. And so that'll be the kickoff of the Jubilee year. And for these next 7-9 months, our plan is to start to collect stories. We've hired a videographer to interview folks and to create a bit of an oral history of the congregation. And then we're planning in September 10th, 11th, or 9th, 7th? A Shabbaton. Yeah, so, a big to-do, right? A big to-do to celebrate really this incredible accomplishment, to start such small and to create really a unique Jewish culture, and a terrific legacy. So please do look out for advertisements over the next 6-9 months about these Jubilee connected events. And certainly put in your calendar
The 6th through the 8th of September.
the 6th through the 8th of
Yes.
September,
It's the weekend after Labor Day.
the weekend after Labor Day weekend. 6, 7, and 8 of September. And we'll celebrate the Jubilee. I think the first meeting was in August, late August
Yeah,
of 74. So we'll kick off that celebration, and there's much more to learn, more stories to tell, and certainly more story to create. So thank you. We do have a fabulous reception. Meryl and others have provided food for us and keep you here. And again, we've got several generations of Beth Evergreen in the room. Try to meet somebody from a different generation, right? And connect, learn one another's stories, invite each other to your Shabbat table, and we'll continue the conversation. Thanks you so much. There's much more happening this week. We have Brad Morrison, Nora Jones, Shabbat on Friday night. We've got quorum auditions for the quorum spiel coming up in March. So look at your calendar. The next taboo topic, so a month from now, so we do it the third Wednesday of each month. We are partnering with the Denver Metro Realtors Association Diversity and Equity Committee and talking about housing discrimination in Evergreen. The history of the blue lining, no Jews and blacks allowed in Taiwan, things like that. Blue lighting, excuse me, yeah. So should be a worthwhile conversation, and we'll so join us for that as well. All right, good. Let's get it.